while ago, I was talking on my Facebook page about martial arts and self-defense attracting all kinds of weird people. And James responded to that with, well, this would be a great episode for a podcast. And what I ended up doing was asking people in the Facebook group, my Facebook group, You Are Not Aries, for their own stories. And we got a bunch of really good ones. And I'll quickly go over some of mine and then get to theirs. Point of this is to, if you as a listener are practicing as well, you might get a chuckle out of these, having experienced similar things. If you haven't just yet, maybe you're new and starting out in your journey as a martial artist or self-defense practitioner. Maybe you haven't had that many of these encounters or haven't had a single one yet. And then this is a warning to you, as in, you are more likely than not to sooner or later have an encounter in the same vein with some weird guy doing something weird, and you have to deal with it. So this is just to give you a sample of all the craziness that is sometimes out there. So let's get started. At one point in time, I was teaching the rec center, and the locker rooms were all aligned because there was lots of stuff going on: basketball, volleyball, soccer, a bunch of stuff. So we would share locker rooms with everybody, and there was a narrow hallway that we had to go all the way along to the end to go from the locker room to the training hall. The judo mats were lined up a little bit further, and that's where we needed to be. So I've had numerous encounters there. I was walking with my sports bag in hand and the kicking shield that we're going to use and my sabers, and there's people in that hallway looking through a window at what's going on in the main hall, where there was, I think, a basketball practice going on. And as I walk by, this one guy just tries to hit the kicking shield out of my hands. Just this bystander, has nothing to do with my class, and he just makes a move to just hit that kicking shield, so I lose it out of my hands. Unfortunately for him, I'd seen his intent because he was looking a little bit too intently at what I was doing, and I pulled away and kept walking and said too slow, and laughed at him and moved on. And he had this goofy grin on his face, and never saw him again. Never saw the guy beforehand. Just imagine that you're doing any other sport and you're walking up towards the field from the changing rooms or going towards a court or whatever it is. Imagine that you're at a tennis club and this guy tries to hit your tennis racket out of your hands or your golf clubs or whatever for whatever reason. That makes sense to him, but doesn't make sense to anybody else. So that's one example. There was another guy who crashed my private training session when I was working in Brussels with a private client, and it was in a big gym, and we rented off the aerobics room, and unfortunately there were glass doors, but there was a paper very clearly visible on that door saying that private session in progress, please stay out, something along those lines. Guy walks in anyway, walks up to us, tries to grab my sword. I pull it away. He said, "Yeah, you want me to attack you with that?" And I'm like, "No, thanks," and give him nothing, keeping a safe distance because, he was a big guy, but despite the fact that I was being armed, I had obviously no desire to have this turn into something confrontational. And he kept going for a while. "Yeah, I'm a boxer, and you want me to attack you with that saber?" And he keeps trying to get into the situation in which I would give him my saber and he'd attack me with it. For some reason in his head that made sense. For some reason he's walking out of the changing room into the main hall of the gym, sees us, and has this idea of like, "Ooh, guys with weapons. I'm going to walk over and challenge them. That's a good idea." Nothing happened, but the point is that it's very easy to get into all sorts of trouble if you just don't realize that you are way off the beaten path when you practice martial arts as viewed through the eyes of some people. They look at you like, "Whoa, That's something weird, special, crazy. I can do whatever I want, and so on. That's been my experience of 35 plus years of training. I've encountered more than my fair share. A lot of it has to do with challenges. Joe, he mentioned a good story where there was really really good judo coach who was in his 90s at that time, and then this guy walks in, basically asks, what would happen if I would challenge you? What would happen if I would attack you? And the coach, again, this is a guy in his 90s, and the other guy, the drunk walking in and challenging this teacher, was obviously a fair amount younger. And the answer of the judo coach was, well, there's about 100 people in the gym, so everybody's going to jump on you and beat you to a bloody pulp. To which the guy, fresh off the street, answered, well, I was a U.S. Marine Special Forces and blah, 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 and he wanders off. So, typical drunk story. I've been fortunate in that the classes that I teach, typically, you don't have drunks wandering around so that they can just walk into your class. But it is something that you need to manage that can very quickly turn into just this situation that goes hands on. It's not like drunk people are always easy to convince of, the stupidity of their behavior. That's maybe a good way to phrase it. And then there's the one I like best was a story from James, in which he talks that he's training Tai Chi with his teacher in the park, and there's this guy who is walking sideways in the park, and he's like, okay, why are you walking like a crab? And the guy then proceeds to talk that he learned this style of moving after training in a temple. To which obviously the reply is, "Ooh, you mean like Wai Chan Kane? The old Kung Fu series for those of you who aren't old enough to remember." And he's like, "No. Guy in his 30s, living in a temple, nobody knows where, but he doesn't want to train with the people in the park that James was training with, but he was willing to give advice, and as he watched them. So throughout the next few minutes, he's constantly like, no, do it like this, raise your elbow there. Oh, there's a kick here. It's more effective if you do it like this, and just on and on and on. And James's teacher eventually clearly got tired of it and said, okay, to that guy, do you do any pushing hands in the temple? And he says, no. Okay, anything at all? And then the guy stands up, like, show me. So what does James' teacher do? He just pushes him into the tree, and the guy hits the tree, and is a little bit bloody as he gets off the tree, and he got quite upset, and then screams, "You would never be accepted in a temple!" And then he's off. Now, we found in the group this story is so hilarious, and I made a t-shirt out of it. So that is now pretty much the official motto: "You would never be accepted in a temple." To which I thought that, well, if that's a temple that accepts you, there's no reason for me to be there, because I don't want to be in that temple to begin with. And this reminded me of the time of when, that's about maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was teaching my Sanda class, so Sancho, Chinese kickboxing. And I get this phone call from a guy who's going on and on about how he's European cage fighting champion, and his teacher is afraid to fight with him because he's so good and this and that. And he repeats that like 3-4 times during the phone call. And I'm like, okay, well, good for you. You're welcome to, come see our class whenever you want. Feel free to join when you have the time. And eventually he shows up. Turns out it's this, I don't know, he looked like he was like 35, 40, pot-bellied, had this kind of crazy look in his eyes, not altogether there, very much out of shape. And still, the first thing he said to me when he came into the rec center, he was, again, giving his bona fides of being a European cage fighting champion and a Taekwondo black belt. I'm like, that's great, man. You can, put on your gear over there, and let's get started. So we start with the warm-up, and just the warm-up in and of itself left him breathing very, very hard. So it's immediately very clear that his European title of cage fighting is only in his head. And everybody's very kind to him, and nobody makes it too hard on him. But it's clear that he's out of his depth. He doesn't say anything. He tries to do the class as best he can. And at the end of class, he walks over, and I'm like, okay, how'd you go? Oh, it's really good, really good. I'll like to take a 10 classes card from you. So we have this card that you pay for, and each time you come to class, you get signed off for one class, and that's basically the subscription model that we use. He paid for it, got the card, left, never saw him again. So for some reason in his head, this made perfect sense. Now I could go on and on and on with stories like this of all sorts of stuff that just happens and that attracts these really bizarre guys. And the last one I'll give, and this is maybe the weirdest story. A few years ago, I was looking at TV, and that's basically the moment that the government was basically showing the 10 most wanted criminals in Belgium. And they were talking about this list, which was relatively new at that time. So like, there's a website, I'll say, I'll go take a look. I take a look, and I recognize one of the guys on it. I'm like, I know this guy. Now, this was a guy who'd always come up to me when I was at a tournament or a championship here in my country, and he'd always be extremely polite and, Wim, how you doing, and this and that, and it's good to see you. Always very polite, big guy, bigger than me. And he competed a little bit, but not all that much that I saw. But always very, very friendly. And then a few years before I basically lost track of him, somebody I knew ran into him and told me the story of how that guy was going on and on to him about how I am going to come out of retirement and fight him in a match. And I'm like, what? So this guy is talking all sorts of nonsense about me, because I'd stopped competing for a while already. And Wim's going to come back. I'm going to fight, and it's going to be awesome. And the guy I knew said, good luck with that. And I said, no, it's going to be okay. Wim's just technical, but it doesn't hit really hard. And the guy he was saying that to used to train with me. We trained together actually, and he knows very much that okay, maybe I don't hit the hardest in the world, but it's not like you'll enjoy the experience. So he laughed a little bit and said, okay, well, good luck with that, and told me the story, and we ended up laughing over it because this just didn't make any sense. No idea where this guy was spreading this story, and eventually, obviously nothing happened. I never saw the guy again. And then all of a sudden I see that he's on Belgium's most wanted list for basically selling drugs and being involved with the death and overdose of one of the patrons in the nightclub that he was the head of security for. And apparently he was dealing drugs from that place and tried to obscure evidence once one of the customers died, and so on. Long story short, and he got caught eventually. Now that was a weird experience as well. My point is this: when you practice martial arts, what you'll notice, and self-defense, you'll notice that you're gonna run into these guys, just from all walks of life. There's people, extremely wealthy, upper class, whatever you want to call it, who are in certain regards out of their minds when they know you do martial arts and self-defense, and just have these weird ideas that they can beat you up for it because it's fine. I once had a guy contact me, and he wanted a sparring partner, and basically what he said, he wanted somebody to beat up, and he said, well, you're a big guy, you can take it. So that clearly, he misunderstood the whole point of me teaching people. I said, look, guy, I'm not a walking punching bag, so you're gonna have to find somebody else. He didn't understand. And you also have people, just regular folks, regular Joes like you and me, who get these crazy notions in their head about being badass martial artists, maybe training a little bit and thinking they're all that, and then just going off into La La Land and thinking you will join them there. And sadly, sometimes that means a very harsh lesson in reality if they push things too far. So in the story that I shared, nothing really happened. There's other ones that I'm not going to go into because we've already hit the 15-minute mark. Might do that another time. But the point is that if you train, be aware that these kind of folks are out there. And there's a whole world of crazy waiting for you, especially if you go looking for it. I would advise caution because if somebody is so out of touch with the realities of violence that they're willing to risk violence by knowingly or unknowingly pushing you in a situation in which you might have to act, maybe stay away from those folks and maybe try to de-escalate and keep it light and get rid of them and get them out of your life as fast as you possibly can so you can avoid any potential complications. I've known other stories that from folks that I train with where it actually went that far. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. So if you can de-escalate, do so. If you can avoid, even better. But just remember that it happens. Depending on where you live, it's going to happen more regularly than not. But it can happen to you too. So, as always, caveat emptor, buyer beware. If you practice, if you train, be aware of this kind of stuff too. All right, that's it, everybody. Have a good day and talk to you next time.